A National Fruitcake Day. I am Nick Pitts, and this is the Millennial Roundtable today. And we are joined by two guests here today. We've got Kerby Anderson and Grant Skeldon, but we've got a packed show for you today. There's so much that's available through the website as well as what we'll be talking about. So kind of some of what we'll be running through today is Dad is the 10th most popular Christmas on the Christmas request list. Dad was number 10 on that. And what is this need for dads in today's culture? Then we'll be talking about faith better than doubt, the understanding of doubt in our culture today, and then increasing skepticism among millennials relative not just to the church, but also to institutions as well. And what's the hope that we can find in doubt? Excessive video gaming has now become a mental disorder, according to an organization. We'll be talking about that. And then the role of religion in the holidays will be declining. All of those articles are available on our website, pointofview.net. We'll be opening up the phone calls as well at 800-351-1212, 800-351-1212. And also, because it's the Millennial Roundtable, the Snapchatting, Uber riding, selfie-taking millennials, we will be on Facebook as well, taking your comments and sharing your questions. So you can go onto our Facebook Live at facebook.com/pointofviewradio to be able to share your comments. But without further ado, let's introduce the legends that are around the roundtable today. I feel blessed to be around this roundtable today. We've got Kerby Anderson here with us, the tried, true, the legend himself. Kerby, how are you?
Happy Fruitcake Day and post-Christmas and New Year's as well. So lots going on today.
Lots going on. And so we have Kerby. We're also joined by Grant Skeldon. Grant, the founder, initiator of Initiative, is here with us as well. Grant, how are you?
I'm good, man. What's up?
Yeah.
Isn't it Kwanzaa, too? Isn't that started?
Yeah. I guess Kwanzaa started. Kwanzaa started yesterday.
Yep.
Yeah, we got so much going on. And I'm still kind of, you know what? I'm shocked by it.
You got to share where you went and what you did.
Yeah, so I've been in Tennessee, literally was just in Tennessee about 3 hours ago. So I just got back from my flight from Tennessee, had a tender Tennessee Christmas in Tennessee with Amy Grant, and then also went to a Garth Brooks concert. So you can't go wrong with any of that. But I had to fulfill my part of the average. I read in The Economist yesterday that the average American will have 6,000 calories on Christmas Day. And due to my grandmother's cake balls and my meemaws, their scrambled eggs and bacon, I easily fulfilled that by probably about 2 o'clock that afternoon. So it was a trip.
And you have to feed people like a platoon. Tell them that story. I've never heard that before.
Well, I have got so if there is, what does it say in Psalm 127 that children like arrows in the quiver of a warrior, and there are a lot of arrows in our family. There's so I've got my step family. There's 3 stepbrothers that all have 3 children. And then you've also, one has 2 children, 3, and then the middle is expecting a 4th. And then my brother's got 1. And then that other side of the family, I mean, there is at least 20 to 30. And so they just kind of move in shifts when it comes to breakfast time.
Kids everywhere.
Yeah, so
wall-to-wall kids.
Plentiful bacon. So PETA was probably crying, but nevertheless, I was rejoicing. And again, I say rejoice at that. So, but yeah, it was a very good Christmas. And so grateful to be back here with you all. But let's jump into it, because I think one of the interesting things for me for Christmas is one of the things I've always been blessed with is this understanding of having a father, just a father that's always been constant, been present. But one of the interesting things that's happening now, and it was an interesting article that was put out over Telegraph, which was in the UK, and that's the first article that's listed on our website. The Telegraph, the newspaper, but also kind of published this survey that was put out, and they showed the top 10 list of what kids were asking for Christmas. And so it's everything from toys to experiences to moments with people. But the 10th was really shocking and was very jarring. And so the 10th on average out of this survey of 2,000 kids was that of a dad. That coming in at number 10 with 2,000 children that were surveyed, dad would top the cracked the top 10. And so it makes us wonder, it continues to kind of bring to mind this understanding here in America as well. We just there's just a need for dads, Grant. I mean, I think about it from our standpoint. There's 40% of children that are born today are born out of wedlock. They're not born into married families, and so there's just this great need for dads in our culture today.
Yeah, I say to a lot of parents, pastors, business leaders that are thinking about millennials, to really consider that text where it talks about Jesus seeing a people that were harassed, helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. And when I think of this being a millennial podcast or on millennials, that millennials really are, I think, harassed. I think it's there. I don't know if there's a generation that's been made fun of more than millennials. Like there is so much negative baggage that comes with our generation, and in the workplace especially, it's kind of like who can make fun of millennials the best, like who can come up with the funniest jokes about millennials. And so they are harassed. When it comes to helpless, there's a lot of systematic things that have always worked in American history that aren't working out like maybe they have in the past for this, I would say, helpless generation. A lot of it's warranted. I'm not saying, oh, boo-hoo us. But harassed, helpless, but especially that sheep without a shepherd. I think that this is one of the most fatherless generations ever. And that has really impacted this generation, is not only not having fathers in the home, but maybe not having emotionally and spiritually present fathers either.
Yeah, Kerby, when I think about that passage in Matthew 9, what you see is that Jesus is just on this healing spree, right? He's gone, the lame have now been restored to health, the blind can now see, the hungry are now fed. And then Jesus gets to a point where there's just, without Netflix, there's just this generation that's flocking because there's attention that's had. And Jesus is surrounded by his disciples, but he's also surrounded by all these people that are harassed and helpless, beat up and cast out. And it's fascinating because he calls them to pray in that moment, but could it not be that he's actually calling them to live out their prayers as well, right? For the disciples?
Very difficult because, again, the pain that individuals are feeling from whatever it might have come about, because, as you said, 40% born into homes where there isn't a dad to start with. Then you add to that the divorce rate that actually has more dads flee. And then back to what Grant has pointed out on more than one occasion here as well, those who may be physically present but emotionally distant. And when you add all that up, this is a generation that has faced it like never before. I'm a trans guy. I can remember back in the 1960s where the cohabitation rate was at like a couple percentiles. The divorce rate didn't really double until from about 1969 to 1981. So the generation that has faced it the most is the millennial generation, the one we're talking about here today. And so this is why, if anything, we need the Christian compassion for individuals that have grown up sort of sheep without a shepherd, looking for someone to validate them. For young boys, the only way they learn how to be a man sometimes is by another man. And if that man is not there, there are just all sorts of issues that we're certainly going to talk about today.
Yeah, so we'll be talking about that and the need for fathers, and then the biblical imperative for fathers to be I mean, you think about it from the biblical standard, like pure and undefiled religion is this, right? To visit the orphan and the widow, and then to sustain the distressed. And so what does that look like today as we kind of live and move in the 2017 world? We'll be talking about that after the breaks, but we want to make sure that you know that you can call in as well at 800-351-1212, 800-351-1212. And then you can also comment on Facebook or share a question on Facebook, and you can find that at facebook.com/pointofviewradio. Again, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. And when we get back, we're going to continue to talk about this need for dads in today's culture. And so we'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
You know, the big four tech masters are Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Google. They dominate the digital world and therefore have a responsibility they've been able to shirk until now. In a recent column, Jim Garrity says that they were not built to differentiate accurate information from inaccurate information, to dispel and counteract hateful voices, or to sniff out and stop disinformation campaigns by foreign intelligence. Instead, they were built to make money. They never first saw how evil people could post live stream videos of murder and other evil acts. They never foresaw how terrorists could use their networks. They never realized how complete strangers could use their platforms to send hateful messages and harass and cyberbully others. For many years now, the Big Four could shrug and emphasize that they were platforms, not content creators. They could pretend they were like technicians running a printing press, or like a college student playing music on the campus radio station. If you didn't like what was printed or didn't like the lyrics of a song, take it up with the creator, not the person printing the words or playing the music. Frankly, that argument doesn't work any longer because these digital platforms have become news and information sites. Jim Garrity says that the Big Four have only two choices. First, they can pretend they aren't in the news business and don't deserve to be a trusted source of information. Americans stop believing emails from Nigerian princes promising millions of dollars. Americans can likewise stop believing what they read on social media. Second, the Big Four can face reality and recognize that they are in the news business and start behaving accordingly. That will require some soul-searching and a level of professionalism not found in abundance inside the Big Four tech masters. It may be the only way they can continue to have the public trust. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And we are back on Point of View on this Wednesday, December 27th day, 2017. I am Nick Pitts. We're hosting the Millennial Roundtable today. We've got Grant Skeldon of Initiative Network, as well as Kerby Anderson joining us today. And we have been talking about the need for fathers. And we've been pivoting off of this story that was put out in the Telegraph. Study of more than 2,000 British parents found that most children would put a new baby brother or sister at the top of their Christmas list, followed by real-life reindeer, pet horse, a car. But despite all these material requests, they had something else that was the 10th most popular, which was a dad, and just shows the increasing need for fathers to be able to come in and fill that space where a pet reindeer might not be able to fill that space. And Grant, when I think about it from a biblical perspective, there you see very strong dads, and I mean this is the Christmas story, right? And so we're living in the midst of Christmas and reminded of just the strongness of Joseph. Mm-hmm. He wasn't Jesus' dad, but he was present and emulated father-like characteristics of being there, of fearing the Lord, of being obedient to him, of caring for, intending to marry, of training up Jesus to be contributing to society as a carpenter. We see some of that in the biblical narrative, right?
Yeah, and I think that one of the interesting things, and I don't know if it says this on the study, is that if all these kids are asking for dads, I wonder how many of them have a dad and are asking for a dad.
Yeah.
Or are they all just
Good
kids
point.
that don't have dads? Because I do think in the church, you would think if our Father is so loving and so caring, there's so much talk about that, like you're talking about. I personally believe one of the most untalked about or just acceptable kind of fathers in the church is a physically present father that is emotionally absent and or spiritually absent. And I would call I kind of came up with some vocabulary for this. I actually wouldn't call him a father, I'd just call him a dad. Is that they've until you want to approach the spiritual like our actual father, then you're, to me, not a father. You're a dad. You're biologically the dad that's physically present, which is better than not being physically present. Yeah. And I know actually in the church there's a lot of what I would call good dads, which are even emotionally present, but they don't really touch on the spiritual. And so I know you're from Tennessee, and I don't got the kind of dad that like has a shotgun or shoots guns or any of that. I was in a small town yesterday, and we were gonna shoot guns, and they want to shoot animals. I'm like, oh man, I didn't grow up where they shoot animals. They shoot, I guess, people. I don't know. But I found that there's a lot of good dads in like rural places where they're like, man, you better, if you are gonna date this boy, you better bring him over here, and I'm gonna be cleaning my shotgun, like country songs talk about. And I would say these guys that are emotionally invested but not spiritually invested are very intimate in knowing about kind of scaring the daughter's boyfriend, but they're not intimate in like helping them in a new relationship with Christ. So they will care about their physical relationship but not their spiritual relationship. And I just don't understand how some of these guys can be elders and deacons. And I've met millennial kids with dads that are not spiritually present in their life, but they're in leadership in the church.
Wow. I mean, Kerby, I'm reminded, if you can't take care of your own household, how can you take care of the people of God, right?
There you go. And again, one of the things that is a qualification for an elder or a deacon is, a nice household and married to one woman and all the other things, ordered household. So that is one of those issues. And this is kind of intriguing. I'd like to hear from both of you about this, because when we look at the secular world, they recognize that this is a problem. I mean, there used to be a men's movement. And then, of course, the Christian world, we had Promise Keepers. I was just looking it up. David Blankenhorn was on this show. It's 20 years ago, if you can believe that, wrote the book Fatherless America.
Wow.
And so this has been something people could see coming and knew was a problem. But it does seem to me that this is one of those issues that sort of transcends the secular divide. I think both non-Christians recognize it would be good to have a dad, and certainly Christians understand that, hopefully from a biblical point of view. But back to what Grant was talking about, sometimes even the Christian dads don't know how to actually develop the spiritual life of their kids.
Yes.
And that's why I would encourage people to get information from Focus on the Family or all sorts of other family ministries, because that's something that you really need to develop as well.
Yeah, I have vivid memories. So I was just back in Tennessee, and so to speak to the animal component, like even in my backyard, there was these 3 bucks actually. So it was kind of fascinating.
Nice.
Too bad I was inside the city limits and can't use a gun, but you had to use a bow, and then I lack the strength and wherewithal to shoot with a bow. But nevertheless, that's beside the point. Let's go back to my, even in thinking about it, Grant, like in high school too, like I have vivid memories of certain girls that I would take to dances, and before I could take them to a dance, there was a father there. Yes. And I had to go through the father to be able to get to her. Yeah. But it was more than that. And this is one of the things that I'm most encouraged by my brother. My brother is modeling what it looks like to be a man for my little niece, so that when my niece lives and moves, and especially in high school, and when she's 40 and begins to date, she's going to be able to see that male figure. This is what a man needs to look like. And I think about that from even today, like as I look around some of my peers, and it just seems as though there hasn't been that manly father figure in their life, and therefore they're willing to sacrifice on certain qualities. Am I speaking right? Does it seem right?
Yeah. I mean, even I think of girls that I know that just have really high values and standards. Not every time, but often there's a father behind that. I've even seen. I love when I see a macho kind of man that's real rough and tough, but then he tries to date his 6-year-old daughter, if you will, in the sense that he's like, I'm going to go on a daddy-daughter date often and really make it hard for any guy to ever get a date with my daughter unless he's willing to jump through the hoops that I've kind of shown her that she's worth.
Yeah, I always think about Jesus. So if Jesus is kind of the model exemplar, right? And so you have Jesus who is, at the one hand, willing to overturn the tables, Kerby, but on the other hand, you see he's described as being meek. It's that characteristic of understanding to have the power and the strength to exercise, but having the self-control in the moment, not to know to utilize my full power in the presence of that moment. And I think about that meekness being one of those qualities and characteristics that seems to be lacking potentially in today's men.
Well, that's the problem, because if you think about role models, in the old days, sometimes people would get their role models from movies.
Yeah,
and what you would have is you'd have the macho man, but he had no tenderness. And then we went through a phase where we had the sensitive feminist man. And again, you're taking these cultural cues from everything other than the scriptures. And so you don't really know what you're supposed to be. And I think Jesus is a perfect example of somebody who was strong in the face of the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the critics, but on the other hand said, consider the lilies of this field, and would talk and treat people with gentleness in the midst of their pain or their sin, but 1 minute later would be in the faces of these individuals who were hypocritical religious leaders. That once you see that that's what manhood looks like, I think you have a much better model than the ones that we are getting right now on television in the movies. And sadly, I think a lot of young boys today say, well, I've got to follow one of those two patterns instead of understanding the full orb of what manhood looks like.
Yeah. So Carla on Facebook brings in a really great comment. She says, when you don't have a father, mothers work all the time. Not having a father who's around makes women have to be less feminine, I think. Being a woman starts to be seen as a real drag. I think there's a good component. There's a healthy component to having a father and a mother in the household to be able to nurture and care for. It's just a very significant component. we're going to continue to be talking about fathers and mothers and the need for fatherhood. But Kerby, I mean, I just think about some of these issues today that we have, specifically with just this first issue, and just the need to be able to have these type of conversations to see what's happening in the world and then to try to think about it from a biblical perspective.
Just before we take a break, let me just mention that because, after all, we're coming to year end, and if you realize this time next week, it's 2018, so we're out of time very quickly. And I know some of you wait to the last moment. Well, we are in the last moment. Today is Wednesday. We're going to have a Thursday broadcast and a Friday broadcast, and that will be it. So first of all, let me just mention that a couple of weeks ago, when we were talking about having 45 years of broadcast, Marlon Maddox started this radio program, Point of View, back in 1972, if you can believe it. We had an individual that said, well, let me step forward and put out a matching grant of $45,000. And so we've had that on the table. Now we have added some other people that have wanted to join with us. So now the matching challenge is up to $65,000. The reality is that we're not even halfway, and we only have a few days left. So I would encourage you right now, even as we go to a break, go to our website, pointofview.net, and the first thing you can do is click on the button there. It gives you some great information. We have a donation amount that I would encourage you to consider. If you give $100, that becomes $200. $500 becomes $1,000. So let me encourage you to take the time right now, because time is just about out. In fact, we have a little thing counting down the number of hours, minutes, and seconds that are left on our matching grant. So please take the time to visit the website, pointofview.net. If you'd like to talk to someone off air, that number is 800-347-5151. Maybe you don't want to deal with the computers, just want to talk to someone and give them your credit card number. That's fine, 800-347-5151. And, of course, if you send us a check, think about this. You better make sure it's postmarked by Saturday, because that would be the last day you'd get a postmark that would say December 30th. And you can send that to Post Office Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. So if you appreciate the conversation we've had today about fathers, later video games, I hope that you will take the time right now to support Point of View. We'll be right back.
In the early 1980s, Jim was moved to help women in crisis. The work was hard, but Point of View was there.
Marlon Maddox really provided the example of what could take place when the average individual in the pew stepped forward and used their God-given gifts and talents, as the Good Samaritan did, just to help somebody in need. There was a transformation that really did take place from just being upset about a problem to actively doing something tangible and real about solving the problem.
Your investment in Point of View shapes hearts and minds across the nation, encouraging more Jims to ask God's help to do great things. Shaping a hope-filled future begins with your gift today, a gift that will be matched, doubled, up to $65,000. Be a key to transformation in 2018. Please give at pointofview.net or call 800-347-5151. Any amount doubles. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View on this Wednesday, December 27, 2017 day. This is the Millennial Roundtable, and we've got Grant Skeldon of the Initiative Network, the leader extraordinaire and soon-to-be author. I guess came in, just submitted the first draft, correct? Yeah. So, and a part of that book will kind of include, it looks like, a chapter on fatherhood.
Yeah, I say the many forms of fatherlessness.
Oh, that'll be great. And so, good. And then we've also got Kerby Anderson that is joining us as well. And so we are also wanting you to join us. And you can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. And then you can also go on the Facebook page, facebook.com/pointofviewradio, and leave a comment or a question that you might have. But specifically, we've been talking about the need for fathers and just the need for fatherhood and really just a manliness to kind of not necessarily the YMCA village people, macho man, but just this understanding of being able to hold both in hands, right? Of being that macho-ness, yes, but to a certain extent being the soft and tender as well, the meekness that we see emulated by Jesus. And so it really is just this delineation, but also an understanding that it doesn't need to be either or, I guess you could say. Yeah. And I think you brought it up really well, Grant, when you said the delineation between fathers and dads. Say that a little bit more for us.
So I would say there's distant dads. I would say there's good dads. I would say there's deadbeat dads. So a deadbeat dad is physically not there, emotionally not there, spiritually not there. I would say a good dad is emotionally there and physically there, but he's not spiritually there. And then I would say a distant dad is someone who's just physically there, shows up after work, and then just veges out. And so he's not emotionally there and or spiritually there. I personally believe that type of dad is really affecting their kids in ways that a deadbeat dad, it's easier to I don't want to say easier, but think about if someone says, hey, do you know your dad, or is your dad still around? And you can say, well, when I was 5 years old, he left, and I've really never seen him since. But I don't really know him, you could say. Well, I think someone that has a distant dad could say, well, I do know my dad. He comes home every night, but I don't know him either, even though he comes every day. So you could say one day he left, or you could say, well, every day he comes back, but I still don't know him. It's kind of like being killed by a shotgun, or there's a whole bunch of pea shooters like over your time. It's like, man, that just get it over with if you're not going to be here. And so I would say that's a distant dad, deadbeat dad, good dad. And then a faithful father is emotionally, spiritually, and physically present.
Wow. It reminds me of what John would say in like 1 John 2, when he talks about how it would be better if they had never come to know, right? It's this understanding, like, I wish they just had never known, or thought they knew the goodness and kindness of the Lord, because if not, then it provided an opportunity for them to be more ripe to understanding and openness and receptiveness. Kind of what you were speaking to about fathers. It's the kind of, I have a dad that's present, but not necessarily fully present in the moment. And so it gives them kind of an allure of like, I'm tasting chocolate right now, but chocolate's bitter. But in reality, chocolate's really sweet, and you're not really tasting chocolate right now.
Yeah. Maybe not even chocolate. I don't know. I'm trying to think of something that's not good that, I don't know. Here's one of my questions, Kerby, I want to ask you is, I made a statement that I think there's a lot of mostly good dads and distant dads. So physically present, but not emotionally or spiritually there. I talk to a lot of men, and as I ask them about why do you think this is, some of them say it's because like maybe you start off not spiritually there because your dad was never spiritually there, so you're learning how to do that, and maybe it's really just difficult for them to turn that ship around. What have you heard success stories of guys realizing this later in their life and saying, I want to be, my kid's 10 now or 15 now or 25 now, but I want to somehow like come back into their life and try to be spiritually present.
Sure. That's one of the themes that runs through a lot of movies. Last night I went to see The Greatest Showman. Of course, it's P.T. Barnum. And first of all, it's not accurate, but there's a place in which he finally realizes he needs to spend time watching his two girls, okay? And we have had so many Hollywood movies where that's the case. Now, are there examples? Yes, I've run into a few. The sad reality is that a lot of the cultural and even emotional development of your child happens before the age of 5. So at this point, they, after a while, start realizing that dad is just never going to be here, so they go elsewhere. But is it possible to, even in the 11th hour, turn things around? I think that it is, especially with prayer and the involvement of the Holy Spirit and an openness on the part of children, because we are, I think, all willing to forgive our fathers for some of the mistakes, even if we're in the midst of the teen years. But I think it's been more of a Hollywood theme in a lot of these movies than it has been a reality in a lot of homes.
I think about it just from my perspective, too. Let's just think about it, like, if I'm just speaking of myself and the role of my father in my life, what he says just carries so much more weight than what anybody else says. And I'm a people pleaser orientation, so I hold a lot of weight for what other individuals say to me. Yeah. But when my dad speaks into my life, when my dad shows up, when my dad invests in my life in particular areas, there's more emphasis and significance that's placed in that particular area. And we can, I mean, you even see this in the biblical narrative, right, where you see like just the placement of the father in the life, and then specifically the blessing that goes into the life by the father into the son. Yeah, there's just weightiness that's put on there, not only with the words that's said, but specifically where those words are said. I think about the 12 tribes of Israel, and how Asher has a particular point, to Naphtali has a particular point, to Judah has a particular point, and the father's words over that point. And just the neat, like, we're seeing that ripple out. Just the words of the father and the attention that the father gives is significant in the children, right?
Yeah. Dude, okay, so I have a cat now. I know it's a transition. If you see these, like, scratches I got on my hands, I just got this cat, man. He's ornery. And with that, I'm trying to get him to hear my voice. Like, in dogs, you can just say no, and they understand. But cats don't know that. Well, but they do know it. But they act like I don't know, they just don't care. And so I say this to say, you know, when I see these movies where, like, strong dads are emotionally invested, or just strong dads, their kids are all acting up. Mom's like, guys, stop. And then the strong father's like, guys, that's all he's got to say. And then all of a sudden they're like,
that deep voice is enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And so how does that, I don't know, for you, my dad is kind of more, hey guys, listen to your mom. And so we know, like, he doesn't actually care that much, but he's kind of trying to submit because mom's not going to stop talking until he says something. But how does it affect it when it's like they're on the same page? Especially a strong man, maybe even taking the place instead of waiting to take the cue from mom.
And I think about Kerby, just even from, like, so if we move away, just the presence of a father and the value that he adds to his child, we move away from the spiritual component. And let's just think about it from a government component, right? If there's a desire to be more conservative minded, limited government perspective, I've just wrote down this small little list of things that my father has provided that is not needed for the government to come in to provide. I think about from a schooling perspective. My dad was just, I had opportunities to go to after school programs, but also knew I had a father to go home to provide an atmosphere whereby I could complete homework and I could have a tutor until I got to algebra, and then he was no help whatsoever, and I was lost in oblivion.
When did they start adding letters to these numbers?
Yeah, exactly. So I think about it from a schooling standpoint. That's less money that the government has. I think about it from a people standpoint. My dad taught me how to treat other people, like especially with this Me Too movement right now. The idea of touching, the idea of making these type of advances on women is just unheard of. I would feel my father's hand in the back of my head or something like that, like the rap discipline.
I'm with you on that one.
I think about that. I think about business perspective. I wouldn't have to go to these after school seminars because my dad helped me, show me how to write a resume, how to have the social skills and soft skills.
How to balance a checkbook.
How to balance a checkbook.
All that stuff.
And there's just so many little components that the father was able to come in, and not necessarily the government didn't have to provide those services, didn't have to spend that moment. In essence, got it more limited style, right?
You know, when Mike Huckabee ran for the presidency, he talked about two towns, Hucktown and your town. And in Hucktown, everybody is married. There isn't a divorce rate. Nobody's using drugs. The children come home to a father and a mother. And he talks about how the social services are very limited because there's not a whole lot that government needs to do. Contrast that with your town, where the divorce rate is 50%, where 40% of all children are born out of wedlock, where kids, because they have so much free time, get involved in drugs, and on and on and on. Mm-hmm. The government has to be huge in order to deal with all the social problems. So you can begin to see that even though we have our libertarian friends out there that say, you know, you talk so much about social values and moral values and things like that, but we just want a limited government. Well, you know what? If you have good, solid biblical values, if I can even insert that word in there, you're going to have limited government. But when the culture falls apart, the family falls apart, people are using drugs and alcohol, they're not working hard, they don't know some of the basic tenets of hard work and resumes and giving an honest day's work, there's where the government has to step in.
Yeah, and we're going to continue talking about this once we get back from the break, and we'd love to hear from you. You can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. And we're also going to be taking some of your comments and questions on Facebook, and so you can go to facebook.com/pointofviewradio. That Facebook thing, I think there's a couple of people on it. I think it's actually going to survive. There's 2 billion people, I think, at last count that are on it. So hop on over to facebook.com/pointofviewradio to be able to hear more, or hop over to our website to see some of these articles, pointofview.net. And we'll be back right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Jerry Boykin has never shied away from a fight. As the CEO of the Family Research Council today, Boykin regularly shares his opinions on a variety of issues from his religious perspective. But Boykin hasn't always been at FRC. A photo recently surfaced of Boykin from 1980. The black and white photo features a youthful Boykin, a major in the U.S. Army then, with dark hair and matching beard. He's addressing a group of about 100 Army Delta Force operators. The room is nondescript, cement walls covered with exposed wiring with but one decoration, a poster. And that's not just any poster. It's a collage of the pictures of the 100 Americans held hostage in Iran. Boykin's Delta Force was about to go rescue them, but Boykin and his men first paused to pray. Many might second-guess this decision. Some might suggest that it was even illegal for Boykin to use his authority to coerce his men into praying. Others might conclude that the act was little more than civil religion, a meaningless act with no more efficacy than if the operators had gathered together and yelled, "Go team!" But for the men about to dive into the face of death and danger, prayer is what they wanted and needed. Thankfully, though our service members sacrifice much in the cause of freedom, they do not give up their religious freedom. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
More people today are saying Americans don't really need religion, but America does need religion. Religion helps the economy, families, and even national security. Learn more by reading Saving America, 10 Reasons Religious Freedom is the Key to Our Nation's Future. You can download this free booklet at firstliberty.org/Saving America. That's firstliberty.org/Saving America. Discover 10 ways religion benefits America at firstliberty.org/Saving America.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And we are back on Point of View on this December 27th, 2017 day. I am Nick Pitts and joined the Millennial Roundtable by Grant Skeldon of Initiative Network and Kerby Anderson. And so we have been talking about fatherhood and the need for fathers and the need for men to step up, not only in the culture today, but also specifically in the church as well. For those of you of the persuasion that are more conservative in nature and tend to desire a more limited government, what the government is not doing requires churches and other civic organizations, what Edmund Burke would say are the platoons of society, to be able to step up, which I think is a really unique opportunity for the church, Grant, because, again, we can't just let these children waste away. We can't just neglect these children, because what Jesus has a very stern word for us, correct, on what we do with children, that maybe not keeping them away, paying attention to them, visiting them as well, right?
Yeah, I think that the church should make it more of a conversation, especially not just for men to have among men, but even to have among men and women, like marriage conferences, to have conversation around this. I think about, I usually tell people, if you want to get to know a millennial, talk about their passion or talk about their parents. Talk about what they want to do in the future, what gets them going. But also, if you ask a millennial, like, hey, what are your parents like? You're going to, they might get emotional. Like, it's a very serious thing. And young people don't ask young people, in my experience, about their parents that much. It's this thing we just don't talk about too much, but you can tell a lot about a person by just figuring out what their parents were like. What did your parents do that you want to do just like they did? And what are some of the things they did? You're like, I never want to do what they did when they did this. I think creating conversations for the whole family so that fathers see how much it impacts the family, as well as, I think, making it a vulnerable conversation in the church where it's not to guilt people, because 9 times out of 10, I found that these men that are convicted that maybe they have fallen away from being a faithful father, they had worse dads than them, so they didn't have this role model. I think of the quote, it's a Chinese proverb, it says, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time is right now. And so just helping them realize, yeah, we could have and should have, we would have changed it back in the day, but let's try to have a conversation about it now. And this is a place where we can all be broken and repent and seek help from faithful fathers.
That's really good.
You know, you mentioned Edmund Burke. He talked about these little platoons. What did he mean? Well, he meant church, he meant community, he meant family. It does seem to me that, first of all, if we recognize that there are a lot of kids that grow up without a father, then it seems to me that those of us that are fathers maybe can adopt, if you will, I'm putting that in air quotes, a child. There were some things that I used to do when our kids were growing up. For example, I was very interested in playing basketball. My son got interested in playing basketball, so I gathered together all sorts of others of his peers, and we went to shooting hoops and hoop it up and all those kinds of things and did that. None of my kids were interested in computers, but I put myself through graduate school doing computers. So I identified some young kids that were interested in that. We went to the Infomart and we went to some computer things and those kinds of issues. It seems to me that a mother right now saying, I really would like a father, but he's not around, or he never was around. You get them involved in, say, Boy Scouts, and then they're around other men. It seems to me that there is a truthfulness and a falsity to It Takes a Village to Raise a Child. Now, when Hillary Clinton wrote the book, It Takes a Village to Raise a Child, she meant, oh, well, the government and everything. But that we want to reject. But on the other hand, sometimes we have a pronoun problem. We say, what should I do instead of what should we do? Seems to me that there are some men that could really volunteer right now to actually teach Sunday school classes. Because after all, the biggest problem I think a young boy faces is he is trying to figure out what it means to be a man, and yet he has to go through a woman's world. Almost all of his teachers in grade school are female. Almost all of his Sunday school teachers are female. Almost all the women in the community that take care of all the details are women. He doesn't have a man around. So, again, there's another opportunity for somebody inside the church, a man, to teach second grade or to teach third grade, or maybe even to have the 2-year-olds or something like that, so that they actually have a man in their life.
Yeah, Grant, I think Kerby brings up great points and some great touch points of things that you can do. And you also brought up a really good point I want to circle back to, is this understanding that we don't want to guilt fathers. And the last thing we want to do is shame kids, because the kids haven't done anything wrong. The kids were literally born into a world, and the father has just become absent now. And there's just some really unique opportunities for men. And speak about, there was one, I saw you post about it, and I also saw it was in Dallas Morning News. There was a middle school, right, that gave a call out. So tell us a little bit about what happened there.
Yeah, there's a church called Truly Missionary Baptist Church. It's only had 2 pastors in like 100 years.
Wow.
The grandpa and now the dad, Donald Parrish, and then it will be Donald Parrish Jr. So a lot of Donalds.
Mm-hmm.
With that, he saw this, I think it was Dade Middle School in South Dallas, and it was actually I thought it was a mentoring day, but it was actually a father-son breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of these guys didn't know their father, or didn't have a father that would be able to be present. And so he wanted to recruit 50 adoptive fathers, if you will, like you said. And I don't know how it got on the news, like, because this is an ambitious guy, and somehow it got on like just a little blog post. It was dallasnews.com, something like that. Long story semi-short is that 500 guys showed up, 800 guys responded in 48 hours of the event. Like Donald Parrish Jr., who put it together, said he just for 48 hours straight was just texting people back and talking to them, and even couldn't get back to all 800, just got the 500 there. But it was awesome. And one of the things, of all things that they got us to do, but they got us to tie a tie together. Like, that was what we did, is like show them how to tie a tie. And I was like, this is kind of cheesy. Like, we're not going to wear ties. I didn't even know how to tie a tie. I'm supposed to tell him how to tie. I was learning. I was like, follow me as I follow Christ, like trying to show him how to tie this tie. But it was really sentimental. There's something about, like, teaching a kid how to tie a tie and then having conversations about who they were. These kids were awesome, man. They were very excited to have these guys there.
Yeah, because I mean, if the statistics are correct, Kirby, there's just a growing need for fathers to be able to step up in these areas. Like I said before, I mean, it's 40% of children that are born out of wedlock today. And then, I mean, if you target certain demographics, that number goes up to upwards of 60 to 67%. And so that's one of the reasons why I just love Point of View so much, is there's the identification of problems that are in the news today, understanding the historicity and the context of it, but then what we've just seen is adding practical steps for things that you can do in order to be able to better the communities that you find yourself.
And just think of the things we've talked about so far. We've talked about fathers. I know next hour you're going to talk about video games.
Oh, can't wait.
And excessive video gaming is a mental disorder, and so we'll get some comments about that as well. And I think it just illustrates again why we really encourage you to support Point of View. We're coming to year's end, and I mentioned in the first half hour here that you could make a one-time gift. Consider also what you might do if you would want to, as we go into the new year, actually give on a monthly basis. We encourage you to maybe consider being a member of the Truth Team. Could be as simple as $1 a day, $30 a month, $360 a year. If you give at the $45 level, which is tied into the fact that we've been around for 45 years, we also send out all these booklets that go along with it as well. We've had one that came out on Sharia law, one on the politicized culture. The one going out right now is Make Your Vote Count, and those are some other resources we put in your hands. So I know you don't give to get, but we certainly like to give you some things at certain levels, and you can find out about that on the website as well. But don't forget, we do have a $65,000 matching challenge. We're not even halfway. It is Wednesday. We have 2 more broadcasts, Thursday and Friday, and that's it. I'll be doing a Facebook Live on Sunday, just on December 31st, but it's not quite the same. So we need to hear from you. And as we go to a break, this would be a great time for you to visit the website, pointofview.net. Or, of course, you can also call our order line number. There'll be somebody there to take your pledge as well, 800-347-5151. And, Nick, when we come back, video games, right?
I can't wait to talk about how bad I am at video games. We'll be right back.
In the early 1980s, Jim was moved to help women in crisis. The work was hard, but Point of View was there.
Marlon Maddox really provided the example of what could take place when the average individual in the pew stepped forward and used their God-given gifts and talents, as the Good Samaritan did, just to help somebody in need. There was a transformation that really did take place from just being upset about a problem to actively doing something tangible and real about solving the problem.
Your investment in Point of View shapes hearts and minds across the nation, encouraging more Jims to ask God's help to do great things. Shaping a hope-filled future begins with your gift today, a gift that will be matched, doubled, up to $65,000. Be a key to transformation in 2018. Please give at pointofview.net or call 800-347-5151. Any amount doubles. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts. And welcome to Point of View on this December 27, 2017 day, the second hour. My name is Nick Pitts, and I'm your host today for the Millennial Roundtable edition of Point of View. And I'm joined today by Kerby Anderson. Kirby, always so good to see you again.
Always good to be with you.
Always good to be with you.
2 days after Christmas.
And happy Fruitcake Day to Kerby, and then to Grant Skeldon, who is the leader, the founder of the Initiative Network, a millennial group here in Dallas as well. And so, Grant, so glad you could join us again for the second hour.
Totally. Thanks for having me.
Man, Grant is the man. So, Grant, tell the audience a little bit about what you're doing now, because you're all over the place. You're just doing everything and doing it all so well.
Yeah. So there was this thing that we started hearing about called millennials.
Millennials?
Have you heard of them?
I have never heard of those before. Fascinating.
Anyway, people really care about them, or they're affecting the things they care about a lot. And so I started this group for, I would say, the unicorns in the church, which were millennials that were mature and godly and loved Jesus and went to church. And as we started gathering these diverse millennials from across Dallas, I started getting a lot of seasoned leaders or people that were chronologically more superior than myself, started asking a lot of questions about young people. How are you getting them to do this? And why are you guys so different? And so it really created a platform to share with pastors that were trying to reach millennials, parents that were trying to raise millennials, and even business leaders that are just trying to retain millennials, since the average millennial, according to Barna, is on the trajectory to have 14 jobs by the time they're 40. It's really disrupting industries. And so I actually spend more time with seasoned leaders and trying to educate and build bridges by helping them share insight about millennials. What I found was a lot of the millennial conversation is dominated by older people talking about millennials, but it's not usually millennials talking about themselves to help build that bridge. And I liken it to talking about whales. It's kind of like 80% of whales are migrating, and in the 80s they used to live over here, and now they're 20% over here and 30% over here. It's a lot of like numeric, like looking at them in a cage. I'm sure you are like this. Like you're like the millennial leader guy, like poster child too, and like a lot of conversations. And they'll be like, we have a millennial with us today who's going to share some great insight, Nick Pitts, and he's just a great millennial. And they talk about us like we're like from a foreign land, and we just live down the street. Like,
we're the last of the Mohicans.
We really are. And so I just found I helped the church a lot in this season best to empower my team to continue to raise up young local missionaries in Dallas as I travel, even the world these days, to educate the church on how to build bridges, because I think the enemy wins if we are divided. And I don't think my generation wins if we're just putting all this passion without the wisdom of the generation before us.
It's so good. So Grant, so just to clarify for listeners, Grant started Initiative, which is the Millennial Network, but now it's transitioning to where Grant's kind of functioning as a millennial consultant to the business world as well as to the church world as well. Where can they find more information on you, Grant?
So for me, GrantSkeldon.com is any information as a consultant, a speaker. I have a book coming out next year. And then Initiative Network, anything about unity, collaboration, just a training ground for young Christians that are impacting culture in Dallas is initiativenetwork.org.
That's phenomenal. That's phenomenal. And so you can access those by going directly to that, or if you're more familiar with our website, pointofview.net, you can find Grant's lovely picture, and you can click on that and find out more information, as well as just some of the information that of some of the stuff that he's doing, as well as Initiative is doing as well. And so in the first hour, we talked about all that was kind of the fatherhood, the lack of father epidemic that's sweeping across not only the U.S., but also in the UK as well. And talked about how on the top 10 Christmas wish list, number 10 was a father among a survey of children in the UK, and just the need for fathers in today's world. And we're going to transition, and we're going to talk about video games in this hour. So you can go over to the Point of View website, pointofview.net. You can find the article that we'll be talking about, because one of the fascinating things happened yesterday. The World Health Organization is adding an unexpected disorder to its list of mental health conditions in 2018. Next year, people who play an excessive amount of video games could find themselves diagnosed with gaming disorder. And for those of you wondering, do I suffer from a gaming disorder? Well, if you here are a few characteristics of an individual that would manifest this gaming disorder. If you've ever, one, impaired control over gaming, onset, frequency, intensity, duration, termination, context. If you've ever thrown your controller at a screen, that's probably a sign. Two, increased priority given to gaming to the extent that gaming takes precedence over other life interests and daily activities. If you've ever found yourself saying, oh my goodness, I missed this, or oh my goodness, what time is it? Or even worse, oh my goodness, what day is it? Then you probably have a gaming
When's
disorder.
the last time I went to the restroom?
I smell. Number three, the final characteristic, continuation or escalation of gaming despite the occurrence of negative consequences. So here, let me give you scope and scale, and then I'm going to be really interested in your comments, so you can call in 800-351-1212 or leave a comment on Facebook, and we'll share that as well. Facebook.com/pointofviewradio. Here's some numbers, because I'm more of a numbers guy. There's around 321 million people in America. 155 million of them say they play video games. According to this study, 56% of the gaming population is under the age of 35 being the oldest millennial. In 2015, 22% of men between the ages of 21 and 30 with less than a bachelor's degree reported not working in the previous year. That's an increase of 9.5% 15 years ago. And here's a crazy statistic for you that Axios put this out last month, that in 2016 rather, let me get this right, because I find this to be fascinating. Men aged 21 to 30 worked 12% fewer hours in 2015 than they did in 2000. And one of the primary reasons was because of video games. Individuals they're working less or not working at all because of video games. Kerby, what is going on?
Well, one of the books we've quoted so often is this book called Millennials, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll hold it up right there. And in there, they said, interesting enough, that there is one technology that millennials always have in their hands. Literally, video game consoles are a part of an industry that pulled in more than $20 billion. And, of course, he goes back a couple of years there. There's a risk in relating a generation to one form of media or technology because, after all, technology changes too rapidly. But at this point in American generations, not one other generation has embraced a technology like the millennials have embraced video games.
We are completely addicted. And so, Grant, I think this is where we're the outlier. Or maybe I'll speak for myself and I'll let you speak before we go to break. I'm atrocious at video games, but I'm also prideful as all get out. And so the idea of me voluntarily playing video games is the idea of me wanting to be humiliated. Therefore, I do not play video games, just like I don't play basketball as much as I want to anymore. But so video games, this is something that's prevalent with millennials, right?
There's one game and one game only. Super Smash Brothers. But other than that, I mean, I remember Christmas when we got an N64, and I would say that was the best Christmas I ever had. Like, I remember that present, was excited. And so there was a time when I played video games. I'm excited to talk about how's that changed and why did it change.
Yeah, and so when we get back after the break, we're going to be talking about the implications of video games. Why is it that allures millennials specifically to play video games? What is it about some of the addictive characteristics that are implicit within video games, the dopamine rushes that come from video games? We're seeing a lot of comments on Facebook right now. We'll air those, and we'll also be taking your phone calls, 800-351-1212, and we'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
You know, the big four tech masters are Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Google. They dominate the digital world and therefore have a responsibility they've been able to shirk until now. In a recent column, Jim Garrity says that they were not built to differentiate accurate information from inaccurate information, to dispel and counteract hateful voices, or to sniff out and stop disinformation campaigns by foreign intelligence. Instead, they were built to make money. They never first saw how evil people could post live stream videos of murder and other evil acts. They never foresaw how terrorists could use their networks. They never realized how complete strangers could use their platforms to send hateful messages and harass and cyberbully others. For many years now, the Big Four could shrug and emphasize that they were platforms, not content creators. They could pretend they were like technicians running a printing press or like a college student playing music on the campus radio station. If you didn't like what was printed or didn't like the lyrics of a song, take it up with the creator, not the person printing the words or playing the music. Frankly, that argument doesn't work any longer because these digital platforms have become news and information sites. Jim Garrity says that the Big Four have only two choices. First, they can pretend they aren't in the news business and don't deserve to be a trusted source of information. Americans stop believing emails from Nigerian princes promising millions of dollars. Americans can likewise stop believing what they read on social media. Second, the Big Four can face reality and recognize that they are in the news business and start behaving accordingly. That will require some soul-searching and a level of professionalism not found in abundance inside the Big Four tech masters. It may be the only way they can continue to have the public trust. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View on this Wednesday, December 27, 2017 day. We are joined at the Millennial Roundtable by Kerby Anderson and Grant Skeldon of the Initiative Network, and I'm Nick Pitts. And so grateful that you decided to join us on this Fruitcake Day, National Fruitcake Day. And we've been talking about video games and how now the World Health Organization was set today to call this a mental disorder. And there's the extent that we are now entering and moving in a world in which the prevalence of video games is causing not only just a mental kind of shifting of balance, they would say, but there's also this addictive nature to it. And Grant, when I'm thinking about this, man, like, why is it that millennials are addicted to video games? Why is it that the numbers indicate that there's just a growing dependency upon video games. What is it that attracts them to it?
Oh, man, I haven't answered. I always think that we were designed for like something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah.
I think that the church is supposed to be the viable option that will fulfill that. But I do think it's crazy interesting that the most cause-oriented generation in the world right now is not connecting with the most cause-oriented organization in the world right now, the church. Mm-hmm. And I think because the church is not what I would say making the commission great again and really going into the world to make disciples of all nations, I think that we have found other ways. And it's not just video games. I think movies, we want to be a part of something bigger than ourselves, so we like to go see movies about people that did things that are bigger than themselves. And video games allows you to not only watch someone do it, but control it.
Wow, that's fascinating. Kerby, you were speaking a little to that with the Millennial book right before we went to break, right?
Sure. And again, one of the things that Tom and Jess Rayner say, and Tom Rayner, of course, with Lifeway, Jess Rayner more a millennial, so you got both a father's perspective and a millennial, is first of all, your generation has been early adopters. You know, how many of you have iPhones and everything? So if these technologies developed in the 1920s, would we have people that would be addicted to those back then? Probably so. So that's the case. And I do want to add the disclaimer that's in the article. Not everyone who plays video games has a gaming disorder. But I already noticed on our Facebook here, some people say, what about the psychologist making this case? And that was a question I had years ago. We had George Barna on. You know who George Barna is. And he had written this article about media addiction. And I first looked at the title and I rolled my eyes saying, yeah, everything's an addiction. But he convinced me, because as I read through that and looked at the various kinds of characteristics of a person who has an addiction, whatever it might be alcohol, drugs, gambling, sex, whatever it is, it was very obvious that, yes, these are individuals in some cases that are. And when you have this one study that says about 8% of people between the ages of 8 and 18 exhibited pathological patterns of play, we're not saying everybody is, but some individuals, they literally don't get up to take bathroom breaks. They don't get up to feed themselves. They stay up till 4 in the morning, and that's being generous, because I know some that will play all night. At this point, to not call that a disorder, I think would be a disservice to the individuals that at least have some kind of balance in their lives.
Yeah, I think that's when you bring up a really great point in the extent that we're seeing radical shifts in behavior. I had a roommate years ago that demonstrated what I would consider a gaming disorder, where literally his schedule was changed to be in this World of Warcraft. Grant, I don't know if you're familiar with World of Warcraft. Yeah. I have no clue. All I know is that he would turn us down to go get dinner or hang out at night because he was supposed to raid, whatever that means, raid with his fellow Raiders, I guess. And I'm not talking about the NFL team. And then you would see him, like, we would come back at night, or I'd wake up in the morning and I'd see him up, and I'm like, my goodness, you're immersed in this game. And it kind of points to, Grant, what you were talking about, the extent that millennials very much want to be a part of something so much bigger than themselves, and they've short-sighted church to be this activity for Sundays and Wednesdays at particular time, when in reality, and they're buying into this lie that somehow video games are this grand narrative they can be a part of, right?
Yeah, I mean, so approaching writing a book, I realized, and with Zondervan, I realized that Zondervan sold one of the biggest books ever with Purpose-Driven Life, and I think, man, why of all books that book just took off, because it's a pretty simple book, but it's around a very complex topic that every human has to battle with, is what is my purpose here on earth. And so I don't think it's a new thing for millennials, but I do think there's other distractions that are really awesome distractions, like video games and or how big movie culture is. Like, if you want to do something on a Friday night, I watch movies all the time. I watched 2 movies just last night. Like, it was like, okay, we're done with that movie. Now let's go live another movie through this other movie. And so there's just so many chances to find a purpose. Or have you seen the commercial for this Ready Player One game or movie? It's coming up. It's a huge budget for a movie where basically it's way into the future, and the whole concept is that we don't live life anymore because there is this unbelievable world that you can join, and everyone is online. And so you have friendships, and I actually even saw that they have come up with a way to do virtual dating where you can do VR system. And they did a virtual date,
I've
2
seen
people that met each other through that. And it kind of created some fun, unique experiences you could have online that you just couldn't have in person.
My goodness.
But I'm not saying it's the right thing. I'm just saying that, man, if you don't know your purpose, which I would say if you don't know God, it's going to be hard to know. If you don't know your creator, you're not going to know what you're created for. And you have a generation walking away from the church. They found other things that can give the fleeting pleasures. They've found that for now.
Wow. And so we're continuing to take your phone calls and your comments as well. You can go comment on Facebook, facebook.com/pointofviewradio, or you can call in 800-351-1212. We'd love to hear your comments about gaming disorder. And so we're going to take one of those phone calls now. We've got Stephen from Georgia right now. Stephen, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, Stephen, what is your point of view?
Hey, well, I was listening to you speaking, man, and I was just thinking to myself, as soon as I put my video games downstairs, I have a family of 3 and stuff. I I basically opened up a business and I teach parkour.
Wow.
And I get to really disciple these kids that are coming in and stuff. And I totally agree with you that it's a false sense of achievement. Like you're achieving something in the video game, but you're not achieving something in real life. As soon as I put that away and I felt it was an idol in my life, I felt God used me and gave me a purpose to actually go through with a true achievement and accomplishing his will, you know?
Stephen, that's so great to hear. You remind me of a quote from Andy Crouch. He's got a book called Strong and Weak. In that quote, he says, the real temptation relative to video games, the real temptation for most of us is not complete apathy, but activities that stimulate meaningful action and meaningful risk without actually asking much of us or transforming much in us. And that's what video games do. They give us this opportunity, like you spoke, Stephen, to feel as though we're risking much, we're being very adventurous, but in reality, as soon as we turn off the gaming system, we go back to real life, and what we realize is that we haven't really risked anything. We haven't really put ourselves out there, but rather we've just been behind a controller. I think that's one of the fascinating things, Kerby, of what we're continuing to see is that there's just this sense that the internet can be used and kind of some technology can be used so detrimentally in our culture today, but there's so many positive benefits to technology today. I think about what we're doing now with the Millennial Roundtable and utilizing Facebook to be able to answer some of these comments, to hear some of these calls, to be able to identify some of these issues and then speak to what the biblical narrative would say, or rather what just some common sense appeals would be.
Again, you know, the internet has been a blessing. I've got 2 books out that relate to video games, one on the whole issue of technology and social trends, and then the other one, arts, media, and culture. And I have a chapter on each of those on video games just because I recognize this is going to be one of those issues. And as we just heard a minute ago from Grant, what's the future going to be like when we have high-tech virtual reality, virtual dating, and all of the rest? And so these are issues that when Marlon Maddox started this program 45 years ago, nobody was thinking about. Even 30 years ago, when we started talking about the internet, we weren't seeing this. But these are the kind of issues we're going to have to deal with in the 21st century. So I hope that as you appreciate what we do around this roundtable, this Wednesday Millennial Roundtable, the Friday weekend edition, as well as each one of the other programs that we do each day, that if you value what we do, I hope that you'll take the time to visit our website. Again, I don't want to be a broken record, but we certainly do need your financial support, and we know that so much of our giving during the month of December comes in the last few days. Well, we're in the last few days. Matter of fact, about a half an hour left before this program is in the record books and is over. So if you can join us, we would encourage you to do so. A couple of ways you can do it. First of all, of course, if you want to write a check, make it out to Point of View, and certainly designate that you would like to have it matched with our $65,000 match, and send that to Post Office Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. You can go right now, and I would encourage you to do so because it's really very easy. Just go to the website, pointofview.net, or if you'd like to talk to someone, maybe you don't have a computer and don't want to put something in the mail, we will give you that opportunity as well. That number is 800-347-5151. That's a different number than the on-air number, but that will give you a chance to talk to someone off-air. If you'd like to put it on your credit card, 800-347-5151. We have a lot more to talk about with video games, don't we?
We are going to be video gaming it up, and so we'll be sure to come back, and I hope you'll join us right after this.
In the early 1980s, Jim was moved to help women in crisis. The work was hard, but Point of View was there.
Marlon Maddox really provided the example of what could take place when the average individual in the pew stepped forward and used their God-given gifts and talents, as the Good Samaritan did, just to help somebody in need. There was a transformation that really did take place from just being upset about a problem to actively doing something tangible and real about solving the problem.
Your investment in Point of View shapes hearts and minds across the nation, encouraging more Jims to ask God's help to do great things. Shaping a hope-filled future begins with your gift today, a gift that will be matched, doubled, up to $65,000. Be a key to transformation in 2018. Please give at pointofview.net or call 800-347-5151. Any amount doubles. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View on this December 27, 2017 day. My name is Nick Pitts, and I'm hosting today, but I'm joined at the Millennial Roundtable by Grant Skeldon of the Initiative Network, as well as Kerby Anderson. And so we have been talking about video games and just the World Health Organization in 2018 will be adding a new disorder to their list of things to give attention to, and that is called a gaming disorder. And there are 3 characteristics that they're looking for relative to this gaming disorder, is what we've been talking about over the previous hour. And the first characteristic is impaired control over gaming, which talks about frequency, intensity, duration. Second being increasing priority over gaming, so they're choosing to be by themselves and play these video games over being with others or doing homework, etc. More important priorities, or what we would consider to be priorities. And the third would be continuation or escalation of gaming despite the occurrence of negative consequences. And just to continue to give you a scope and scale of this, it's just gotten to be very significant now in our culture today. There's just increasingly more individuals that are gaming right now, with even certain studies that are putting out that young millennial men are working less because they are gaming more, that they're skipping out on opportunities, and really it's beginning to be very detrimental. And so we're continuing to take your phone calls and then your comments as well. And so we have some calls that you can make a call rather, and you can call in at 800-351-1212. Or you can leave your comment on Facebook or a question on Facebook at facebook.com/pointofviewradio. And Grant, I want to take one of these questions or comments that we have from Blake Bailey on Facebook right now. So she says, it's a rainy day today. Kids are inside. My teens listening to this program. So hello, Mr. Bailey, listening to this program right now with the controller in his hands. And so as a mom of a young man that truly wants to honor God with his life, see a different side of him when he's playing, I can totally agree. There is a different side, especially when I'm playing, and i.e. frustration at how awful I am. So you see the emotions, the frustration, and then it becomes easy for him to take that out on others in the house. Please speak to the double-mindedness of being a gamer that should be leading by example and not allowing the game to have control. And so help me to better understand this, Grant. Like I see this especially in my own life, especially when I get involved in those situations or those activities that really do captivate me. It taps into something inside of me that's really outside the norm. Sports is it for me. Like when I'm watching my Vanderbilt Commodores, and especially the frustration that happens because they're so awful, it does something inside of me, and I have to pull back and recognize these are just college kids playing a video game or playing a child's game, right?
Yeah.
And so
or Austin Peay.
Really, it's not really unique to video games, but it is accentuated by video games, right?
Yeah. A couple thoughts I had was, one, don't guilt, because video games are fun, and but two, really speak into purpose while the controller is not in their hands, so that when the controller isn't in their hand, it's for fun. It's not for escape. I was thinking, how many things do people do to escape their reality? Pornography, drugs, alcohol, go to the movies constantly, play video games constantly. It's to leave your life to enter into an alter life, if you will. And I just think people with purpose are disturbed by this idea. But if you don't have a purpose, then you'll latch on to whatever you can find. Like today, I was actually looking. I wanted to see, how did all the disciples? What happened to them? Like I heard they all died, but like how? And it said that Peter went to Rome, got crucified upside down. Andrew went to Western Greece, was scourged, and then put on the cross. James killed by a sword. John exiled. Philip also crucified. Bartholomew skinned alive. And go on and on. Speared to death. Thomas. And I just think, man, these guys had such legitimate dire purposes. Could they even fathom the idea of playing video games for too long? I'm not saying, I bet these guys needed to have joy. Like, you can't just be persecuted day and night. So there's outlets, but if you're so latched onto your purpose, it's just laughable to give an unbelievable amount of time to something that distracts you from what consumes you, like you're calling.
Yeah, Kerby, I'm thinking about this right now, especially for the comment on Facebook. I'm thinking to myself, the goal, I mean, it really isn't just a call to quit playing video games, right? Like, because video games are neutral, right?
Yeah, right.
Video games are really just a mirror that reveal our own hearts and reveal our own passions that are inside of us, right?
Well, and again, even in this article, it talks about some of the benefits. In my book, Arts, Media, and Culture, I've got a chapter on video games, and it improves your visual acuity. A gamer is more likely that if a ball rolls into the street, to look for a child that might be following it. In terms of hand-eye coordination, even in this article, it talks about problem-solving ability. So there's obviously some benefits, but what we're talking about is the extreme. Not everybody that plays video games has a gaming disorder, but we are talking about some individuals that seemingly have no balance. And back to what Grant is saying, when there are so many things that we can do to the glory of God, we sort of have to ask ourselves, at what point is this becoming, as we heard from Stephen just a minute ago, becoming an idol, something that dominates so much of my time? And he, I think, talked about one creative suggestion I give in my book, and that is, think about the location of your television set. Think about the location of your video game. Sometimes it's just easy to plop down on a seat, grab the controller and turn on television, or plop down and start playing a video game. Make it a little more difficult so that you might end up picking up a book. I know that's a concept, picking up the Bible instead of, some of these controllers. And so do some things so that you just don't fall into a habit that becomes an addiction and really destroys your life.
Yeah, I think it really does. You bring up a great point. It brings up an opportunity to be aware of the location of where the system is. And so I think about you're really setting yourself up for failure if it's in a bedroom. And the bedroom, there's a TV, there's a gaming system, and then they're struggling with isolation or feelings of loneliness. Well, that video game has specifically been designed scientifically to be addictive. Like it's causing your brain to change to such an extent that it wants another hit of dopamine. So it really is. It's a vicious cycle, if you were to put it there, for those individuals that are prone to that. And then there's the spiritual component too that I want to press in on pretty hard, Grant. It's this idea that, man, the church is so much more than an activity of what we do on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And like it literally, so video games are so attractive because you're in essence, you're trying to save the world.
Yeah.
That for the better part. Well, the beautiful reality is we are agents of reconciliation, according to Paul in 2 Corinthians 5. We have been sent out on mission to be able to go to seek and to save that which is lost, to utilize the tools and the gifts that the Spirit of God has given us and has empowered us, which isn't a spirit of fear or timidity, but is a strength, the power of self-control, that greater is he that is in us than he who is in the world. We have the extra life in Jesus because we have a new life in Jesus, and we're doing more than just shooting people up, but we're really killing them with kindness by heaping burning coals on their head with that kindness and the goodness of the Lord, recognizing to be true that there is no game over for us. This is the game because we are living in the midst of eternity right now, and we have a beautiful opportunity, so much more than a video game, not just to save the world, but to bear our burden in the world, to point to the creator of the world.
Dude, I don't even know how to follow that up.
It's such a neat opportunity that video games are really just tapping into this little yearning inside of us, but it opens up the opportunity. If the Spirit of God can breathe life into that, right? The Spirit of God to breathe life into that and see that it's so much more than just a video game that we have an opportunity to play. Yeah. We're doing something more.
I would say, even this conversation made me think we don't need to deconstruct, like for the kid with the controller in his hands, it's not deconstructing escaping through video games, because sometimes if you're constantly being persecuted, having hobbies is okay. It's not sinful. So not deconstructing the escaping through video games, but reconstructing our purpose through the Great Commission. Yeah. And it made me think, and I used to work here, but it's like back in the day, if I had Papados and I have access to Papados all the time, Long John Silver's is not going to be that tempting to me. It's just like, I have Papados. But maybe every now and then I'm like, I want something different. So yeah, I can go get something at Long John Silver's. I personally don't know who keeps that place in business because none of my friends have ever suggested, hey, how about Long John Silver's? But it just puts everything into perspective of what, not that Long John Silver's is bad, it's just Papados is really, really good.
Yeah, so taste and see that the Lord is good. So in high school, this is probably not something I should share, but I'll go say it anyway. In high school, we used to, for pranks, because unfortunately I was not a perfect person, and we would go, my buddies would have pranks, and we would dress up as pirates on Halloween, and we'd go through the drive-thru of Long John Silver's, and we'd say, another cup of water for the captain. But nevertheless, we are going to continue to talk about video games, but we got to take a break. And once we take that break, we'll come back and we'll be talking about gaming disorder and some of the problems that's inherent within it, but also just those yearnings for eternity that are placed in it. If you can just have eyes to see, you can see the gems of our Father, and the passion that comes from video games really can be tapped into the bigger picture, into the Great Commission. And we want to continue to encourage you to comment onto Facebook. So you can go on facebook.com/pointofviewradio to share your comments or your questions, or you can call in as well. That number is 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. We'd love to hear your comment or your question about video games or anything else that we've been talking about today. And we'll also redirect you to the website as well to find out more about video gaming disorder, as well as if you feel so led to make a contribution to Point of View Radio. We'll be back right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Jerry Boykin has never shied away from a fight. As the CEO of the Family Research Council today, Boykin regularly shares his opinions on a variety of issues from his religious perspective. But Boykin hasn't always been at FRC. A photo recently surfaced of Boykin from 1980. The black and white photo features a youthful Boykin, a major in the U.S. Army then, with dark hair and matching beard. He's addressing a group of about 100 Army Delta Force operators. The room is nondescript, cement walls covered with exposed wiring with but one decoration, a poster. And that's not just any poster. It's a collage of the pictures of the 100 Americans held hostage in Iran. Boykin's Delta Force was about to go rescue them, but Boykin and his men first paused to pray. Many might second-guess this decision. Some might suggest that it was even illegal for Boykin to use his authority to coerce his men into praying. Others might conclude that the act was little more than civil religion, a meaningless act with no more efficacy than if the operators had gathered together and yelled, "Go team!" But for the men about to dive into the face of death and danger, prayer is what they wanted and needed. Thankfully, though our service members sacrifice much in the cause of freedom, they do not give up their religious freedom. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
More people today are saying Americans don't really need religion, but America does need religion. Religion helps the economy, families, and even national security. Learn more by reading Saving America, 10 Reasons Religious Freedom is the Key to Our Nation's Future. You can download this free booklet at firstliberty.org/Saving America. That's firstliberty.org/Saving America. Discover 10 ways religion benefits America at firstliberty.org/Saving America.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And we are back on Point of View Radio for this last little segment. I am Nick Pitts, and I'm joined at the Millennial Roundtable by Kerby Anderson and Grant Skeldon. And so we have been talking about video games and just the increasing prevalence of video games, the addictiveness of video games. But Grant, let's think about some practical steps for those that are listening and those that have commented on Facebook. Let's hone into the practical component, because I think we've identified the scope and scale of it. We've identified the idea that it's not necessarily bad, but it's not necessarily the best usage of time all the time that you can do. So what are some practical steps that individuals can be taking in order to, one, to maybe enjoy video games, but two, not be consumed by video games? Have you learned anything? Have you heard of anything from individuals that you know that are trying to follow the Jesus way that have an interest in video games?
Two things. I would say leverage it for community mostly, and then two, don't put it in the place you spend most of your time, like your room.
Wow.
I think to this day, man, I'm going on a retreat this weekend, and I'll be in the woods, and there'll be a campfire. But once we have to be inside because well, it's probably not cold to everyone up north, but to me it's cold. It's really cold at 30 something. I'm gonna bring Super Smash Brothers N64 for anyone that grew up in the 90s and play Super Smash Brothers, and I'm gonna play with Ness, this little kid with a bat, and I am good at that player. Now that's the only game I really play. I've not tried to get better at other games, but I do it when we can play 4 players, and it creates a lot of relationships through. It's unique how people, even introverts, can come out of their shell when playing a video game, and so. I like using it for community. If I'm always playing by myself, I'm probably doing it wrong. Even though you could say I'm around these people online, physically playing with people that we can turn it off and go do something else. That's my preference. And then second, similar to Simon Sinek saying, maybe get an alarm clock instead of having your phone charged. The days in which I got an alarm clock, and the days in which I put my phone in the kitchen and charge it there and just set an alarm clock are way better than the days when I sleep with my phone. And so in the same way, it's just wise probably not to have that where it's a distraction or something you could do because you get bored, because we get bored a lot.
Well, again, let's back to the key issue. If you can't tame it, then you should trash it, right? I mean, that's kind of the whole issue here. And we recognize that there's a percentage of individuals that apparently can't actually moderate that, and there is an addictive nature to a lot of things. And so video games is just one of those situations. But sooner or later, Nick, I think we need to come back and recognize that if you want to be successful in life, you're going to be a reader. Readers are leaders, right? And if this takes you away from reading God's Word, reading key books, that's going to be important. If it takes you away from relationships, that's an issue. And so I think what we're asking for people to do here is to do a self-assessment and evaluate that. And if they're not good at that, we also have a lot of parents listening right now, and they're sort of saying, okay, how many hours is too many hours on a video game? Well, I think you're going to have to be a good student of your child to figure out what is maybe becoming too much. And then maybe you need to say, you know, we just need to set an alarm clock that says, okay, you can play the video game for an hour, but then when the alarm goes off, you're going to do something else. Those are just some obvious, concrete steps that I think we could take.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I think about my own growing up on my own, or not growing up on my own, but growing up in the Pitts household. One of the big things was we didn't watch TV till 7 o'clock, and that included video games. And up until that point, it was filled with either piano, which I was awful at, or it was with reading and doing your homework. And so there was just that. There was a time for video games. There was a time for TV. But there's a vast majority of time for homework and some of those other things. And Grant, I think that's a really great point when you brought up about leveraging it for community. I mean, the statistics prove to be true, and I feel like I'm a broken record, especially for our audience, how increasingly we're feeling the pangs of loneliness in our culture today. We're especially Gene Twenge and that phenomenal Atlantic article, the number of individuals that are choosing not to hang out with their other friends. High school seniors, 15 years ago, 85% of them had said that they went out on a date. That number's decreased down to 58%. Just the sense of the loneliness that's beginning to be so epidemic in that culture, and how video games are contributing to that, but also can be leveraged, right? You can use those video games in order to bring other people along, and if, in my case, make them feel really good, because they'll look really good when they're playing against guys like me, right? And so really using those video games to leverage it for community, being another conduit, whether it's a meal that's typically been leveraged for community, or whether it's a sporting event that's been leveraged for community, that video games have that propensity as well.
Yeah, man, this conversation excites me in the sense that there's a lot of hope, and we're in a really important window in the sense that we've talked about how people are, in my opinion, they look at pornography, they do drugs, they do alcohol, they watch tons of movies and or look at play tons of video games to escape their lack of purpose or angst in the life that they currently have. But also, if you're going to play video games, then play it in community to that they're looking for community and something that's easier but riskless or costless. Is there anything that creates and gives more purpose and meaning and community? Like Jesus didn't just call one guy to disciple; he called 12.
Yeah.
And so I would even say that millennials aren't as cause oriented as people say. They're not activists, in my opinion. They are community cause oriented. Because like today, I don't think anyone's going to look for Coney, and today I don't think that anyone's going to put an ice bucket on their head. Even though it's just as important it was that one day, but it's the days when everyone does it as a community. And so I find a lot of nonprofits are like, I'm tired of hearing that young adults are activists when we try to recruit them to volunteer, they actually don't. And I would say, because they don't do it individualistically. They do it as a community. And what gives me hope is the church, maybe more than anything, could ever provide a cause community. And so what we just got to do is get back to the basics, or like I say, make the commission great again.
I think that's that's so encouraging to hear, Grant, because you're right. It's not necessarily that there's no desires. I mean, it's very clear that millennials are leaving the church. It's very clear that millennials are leaving institutions. We're a finicky bunch. But the desires to be a part of something bigger, the desires that make up the church, are very much aligned with what millennials are very much desirable.
Yeah.
Those are congruent. So if the church can, like you said, get back to basics and really identify what are those things that they can really leverage that Jesus has called us to in order to be able to make the Great Commission great again, to be able to go and make disciples of the world, to make heaven crash down here on earth. Yeah. And we're seeing that even in a video game article, Kerby. It's just so fascinating how we can continue to take what is quote-unquote secular news, if there's no such thing as a sacred secular divide, but we can take the news that doesn't appear to have anything to do with Jesus, and we can see those echoes of eternity in it, because they're really pointing back to just those desires that God has placed within us to really utilize for the glory of his name and for the good of this world.
And I was just thinking, even pastors listening to this right now, just think about this. If you're next time going to be teaching or preaching on the issue of self-control, that is one of the fruits of the Spirit, you could use this as an illustration, saying there's nothing wrong with video games, but if you don't have self-control, again, this would be a connection point to some of the listeners and some of the members of your congregation and others that actually see this as a point of contact. So there are just a lot of things that we talk about on Point of View just to help you in your Christian life, and hopefully even give you some sermon topics and those kinds of things. So just before out of time, let me mention again one more time that we are coming to the end of the third day in this week, and we have 2 more to go. So if you have not had a chance to visit our website, the website is pointofview.net. $65,000 matching challenge, and we have a need for about $250,000 before the end of this year. And I will give you the exact numbers tomorrow when we get back into it. And if you'd like to know a little bit more about this, you can call someone, 800-347-5151. We'll go off the air, but we can still take your phone calls. And, of course, if you'd like to write to us, it's Post Office Box 30, Dallas, Texas, 75221. Nick, thanks for hosting today.
Hey,
great job.
Thanks for having me, setting the right example for me. So I'm so grateful that you decided to join us today on Point of View. And so be sure to check out the Facebook page at facebook.com/pointofviewradio to be able to leave your comments and questions, and we'll be sure to get back to you on that. You can be sure to donate on the website as well. You can go to pointofview.net to be able to do that. And Grant, thanks so much for being here with us, man.
Thanks for having me.
As always, Grant is the man. You can find out more information on him at the website as well. And we'll see you back tomorrow.
In the early 1980s, Jim was moved to help women in crisis. The work was hard, but Point of View was there.
Marlon Maddox really provided the example of what could take place when the average individual in the pew stepped forward and used their God-given gifts and talents, as the Good Samaritan did, just to help somebody in need. There was a transformation that really did take place from just being upset about a problem to actively doing something tangible and real about solving the problem.
Your investment in Point of View shapes hearts and minds across the nation, encouraging more Jims to ask God's help to do great things. Shaping a hope-filled future begins with your gift today, a gift that will be matched, doubled, up to $65,000. Be a key to transformation in 2018. Please give at pointofview.net or call 800-347-5151. Any amount doubles. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.